All right, now that we can decode that URL, let's add in some HTML to show this little card right here that's going to eventually have the secret message inside of it. So once again, back inside my index.html file, I'm going to find the div with class COL right there, short for column. And right after it, I'm going to add in another div. I'm going to give this one an ID of message. How about message-show? Just kind of stick with the convention that we have with these other divs. I'll then give it a class of card-panel and a class of hide. So by default, this div is going to be completely hidden, and we're not going to show it to the user. Then inside of here, I'm going to place an h1 element. The h1 is going to start off as empty. Once we decode the message, we're going to select this h1 element and put the message inside there. So this is kind of a placeholder where we are going to eventually show a message to the user. Then after that, I'm going to add in a div with an anchor element. This is going to be a link that the user can use to create their own custom message. So I'm going to give this thing an href of ./index.html. And then inside the anchor element, I'll say create your own secret message. So whenever a user clicks on this anchor element, we're going to essentially reload the entire index.html page or the entire document, and that's going to take out the URL, or excuse me, take the hash out of the URL. All right, so now back inside of our index.js file, we're going to add in some code to check to see if we have a message in the URL. If we do, we're going to remove the hide class from this div. We're going to add it to this div, which is usually shown by default, and then we'll decode the message and stick it into that h1 element. Okay, so back over here, I'm going to take off the console log function, but keep in the code that was inside of it. Do make sure that you fix up the number of parentheses at the very end as well. I'll then assign this to a variable that I'll call message. Then we'll say if there is a message, let's toggle the visibility of those two different divs. So we need to select this div and add the hide class, and select that div and remove the hide class. So I'll do document query selector. We'll first do message-form. I'll do a class list, and we'll add the hide class. Then I'll do a second document query selector. In this case, I'm going to find the ID message-show. I'll look at the class list, and then I will remove the hide. Then finally, we can select that h1 element and stick our message inside of it. So I'll do a document query selector h1 in our HTML, and I'll set the message inside of it, like so. Okay, so I think we're ready for a test. So I'll save this, go back over. I'm going to go to the index.html file directly. I'm going to make sure I remove the hash out of the URL, so we're going to test the entire flow here. I'll then put in my secret message. I'll hit create. I'll copy that. I'm going to put it into a new browser tab just to make sure I kind of simulate passing this link off to someone else. Hit enter, and I see my secret message appear. I should then be able to click on create your own secret message and be taken back to this form, and I don't have any hash inside the URL. So looks like we got it. Now there's just one awkward thing here. You'll notice that there's a lot of extra spacing above the h1 element. That is because this h1 element by default gets some margin on the top of it. So if I hover over it, I can see that kind of orange section right above. Again, that just means by default an h1 has the margin on top. So I'm going to add in just a little bit more of CSS to remove that margin on the top. So back inside of my index.html file, I'm going to find where we have the row class. And right underneath it, I'll put in h1 with a margin -top of 0. Okay, so save that. And one last test here, I will refresh, and that looks way more reasonable. Okay, so I'd say this looks pretty good. So now the last thing we really have to figure out is how we can effectively actually share this application with other users. Right now, this link, like we said earlier, can only be shared with you on your own computer because that is where the index.html file lives. So if you are just sharing messages with yourself, well, that's not super fun. So let's figure out some way to actually make this available to other people, which will definitely be a little bit more interesting.